4 years. So we had this experience, and we can do that.
Government Bill. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the Banking Amendment Bill 2025. Honourable Chen Chen-ying, Chairman of the Bills Committee on the bill, will first address the Council on the committee's report. Mr. Chen, President, in my capacity as the Chairman of the Bills Committee of the Banking Amendment Bill 2025, I report the key deliberations of the Bills Committee. The bill seeks to amend the Banking Ordinance to introduce a voluntary mechanism for authorized institutions, AIs, to request or disclose information for the detection or prevention of crimes and make safe harbor provisions for them. Under the mechanism, when AIs become aware of suspected prohibited conduct, that is, money laundering, terrorist financing, etc., they may share with each other information of both corporate and individual accounts on a voluntary basis. Members in general support the bill in order to enhance the security of the financial system in Hong Kong. In the two meetings held with the administration, members have put forward various comments in a bid to assist the banking sector to understand and comply with the statutory requirements to ensure effective implementation of the proposed mechanism. Members are pleased to note that the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Hong Kong MA, Hong Kong Police Force, and the Hong Kong Association of Banks, Hong Kong AB, announced various new anti-fraud measures in April 2025 and have asked questions on measures to combat the lending selling of accounts. Members have pointed out that the mainland and Singapore have implemented specific legislation with a threshold lower than that in the Organised and Serious Crimes Ordinance. The mere lending or selling of accounts would constitute evidence of an offence. Members have suggested that the administration draw on international experience to streamline the prosecution procedures to improve the anti-fraud legal framework. The administration has responded that it would study the feasibility of the proposal with the police and would continue to draw reference from international practices. To encourage participation, members have suggested that the administration provides tax incentives as well as technical support and that the sharing mechanism be extended to cover non-banking institutions such as brokers and virtual asset companies for comprehensive regulation. The administration has indicated that as AIs had their own mechanism in place to detect suspicious transactions, the additional cost arising from the mechanism would be limited. At this stage, the target was the banking sector, as over 80% of suspicious transaction reports came from this sector. Currently, 10 retail banks have taken part. They were large as well as small and medium-sized banks and virtual banks. The coverage of accounts was 75%. The Hong Kong MA would continue to provide technical support. It would keep an open mind about the extension to other financial institutions in the future. On the monitoring of the information sharing and privacy protection, members have suggested setting up a better internal assessment system for AIs and a public complaint hotline. The administration has stressed that vigorous safeguard measures had been put in place to ensure that the information will only be used for detection of crimes. AIs would lose the protection of the safe harbors in the event of abuse. Both the Hong Kong MA and the police had set up dedicated complaint and inquiry hotlines, and the operation was being further improved to enhance regulatory effectiveness and transparency. Members have expressed concern about how personal data and privacy would be protected during the sharing process. The administration has indicated that the bill had adopted the exemptions in the Personal Data and Privacy Ordinance as the legal basis to enable the sharing of information under specific circumstances without the need to obtain customers' consent. The Hong Kong MA would set out operational standards such as time limit for keeping information and require AIs to establish corresponding internal assessment mechanism through its guidelines. In addition, the bill proposes to empower the Monetary Authority MA to designate a platform for information sharing among AIs. Members have inquired about the regulation of the designated platform, whether it would be outsourced, and how it actually operated. The administration has explained that there were two main platforms under consideration. The first one was the Financial Intelligence Evaluation Sharing Tool, FINEST for short. It was jointly managed and developed by the police, the Hong Kong MA, and the Hong Kong Association of Banks. Its security and management would put the public at ease. The other platform under consideration was ICL Net, operated by the Hong Kong Interbank Clearing Limited. It was highly secure, and the Hong Kong MAN, the Hong Kong AB, had absolute control over its operation. Due to information security considerations, there was no pressing need to designate other platforms at present. Should there be a need to introduce other platforms in the future, the Hong Kong MA would carefully assess the systems of control of AIs and would fully communicate with the police and the banking sector before the designation to ensure that the mechanism can work effectively. On the notification system, members have noted that when banks detected or suspected any suspicious activities, they would be required to submit a suspicious transaction report to the Joint Financial Intelligence Unit (JFIU). Under the proposed mechanism, AIs could notify each other of the details of suspicious transactions through the designated platform. Members were concerned about how the two mechanisms would complement each other to speedily block the movement of suspicious funds. The administration has explained that if an AI became aware of potential fraudulent activities, it could immediately trigger an alert to quickly fill the information gap and then file an official report to the JFIU as soon as possible to block the suspicious transaction. President, that was the deliberation of the Bills Committee. I now express my own views. First, I declare that I work in a retail bank that engages in the financial services. In the past 5 years, there has been an increasing number of fraud cases of online transactions. It gives a lot of opportunities for perpetrators to engage in illegal activities. In the first 11 months in 2024, there has been 40,000 fraud cases involving a loss of about 8.5 billion Hong Kong dollars. Under normal circumstances, when the culprit obtains the funds will be distributed into different accounts and then moved away. It's very difficult to trace the movement of the funds. The victim is unable to get back the money deceived. Altogether, last year there is about 80,000 cases related to financial fraud. Market participants and regulators have the duty to protect the security of funds. They also need to work with law enforcement agencies to combat such crimes. Under the bill, there are safe harbors allowing AIs to share information among themselves. This will further enhance the ability to combat money laundering as well as illegal activities. A number of jurisdictions, say for example UK, US, Singapore, have a similar legislation to handle similar activities. There are safe harbors, and the operation is on a voluntary basis, which is similar to the approach in Hong Kong. Different parties have put in place measures to combat financial illegal activities. Say for example, measures to enhance exchange of information. In 2023, Finance was launched. Only corporate accounts are covered. During the pilot stage, only 5 banks participated. The number has increased to 12. About 20 or 30 requests for exchange of information occurred every month. It seems that it's widely used. Well, it's easier to open a personal account instead of a corporate account. That's why 90% of these fraudulent cases involved individual accounts. Finance is not able to do its job to the fullest. With an increasing number of fraudulent activities and the speed of funds being moved away, in order to more effectively block and detect these money laundering activities, we need to make good use of time. There is an increasing demand for information sharing. Under the bill, the coverage of information exchange will be extended to individual accounts. It may be on a voluntary basis. I believe that the sector will very actively participate and work together to trace illicit funds. There are 10 banks. They cover about 75% of corporate and individual accounts. That means 25% of accounts is not covered. If perpetrators make use of bank accounts that are not covered, then the ability to trace the funds and detect the crime will be greatly dampened. So the more account the mechanism covers, the more effective the function is. You have to have small eyes in the fish net in order to catch the most fish. I suggest that a target of 90% of coverage of accounts should be set. In addition, a timetable and roadmap should be put in place. We need to have more participants so that the ability to detect crime will enhance. From the perspective of customers, of course, there are concerns about privacy protection, especially the integrity and security of the sharing platform. The administration said that Finance, ICI Net have adopted professional encryption in the transfer of data. Data processing takes place on government cloud. The security of these systems is ensured. The mechanism is also regulated by the PDPO. Sharing of information is only used for detection of crimes. The Hong Kong MA will also regulate the operation of the platform. If necessary, the scope will be tightened. Institutions that have not complied with the requirements may have their recognition taken away. Banks themselves will also do their best to protect privacy. So between the protection of privacy and the sharing of information, there is a balance struck. It's very important for us to get the trust of the public. The police and the Hong Kong AB should enhance their publicity to better explain about the sharing of information, the security of encryption, to dispel concerns. I hope that with the endorsement of the bill, the sector will make use of the mechanism to identify mute accounts as well as suspicious transactions so that they can alert each other to block movement of illicit funds. This will reduce the damage of money laundering to the general public. This will also be conducive to building a healthy and robust financial system. I support the bill as well as the amendments. Thank you.
Mr. Robert Lee. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the Banking Amendment Bill 2025. The bill seeks to introduce a voluntary mechanism so that authorized institutions, that is AI, which are banks, may request or disclose information when they detect suspected deception. This will allow them to more closely collaborate with law enforcement agencies. By disclosing personal and corporate information, they can better protect the public. Now, I'd like to highlight 3 points. Now, the Bills Committee raised concern about the information sharing between AIs. Now, would it expose flaws within the internal system of AIs or information that exceeds the scope of request would be disclosed? Now, the administration said that a balance would be struck between regulation, privacy, and the protection of public interest. Guidelines would be offered to banks, and there will be communication between AIs and law enforcement agencies. The law specifies that only under certain scenarios can an AI make a request of information to another AI, and also the purpose of the information disclosed can only be used for detection or prevention of crime or money laundering. Now, the administration was urged to explain to the industry that the mechanism is not for picking faults, so as to encourage more AIs to join the mechanism. Now, the mechanism may be extended to non-banking sector AIs. Now, at the moment, the mechanism is targeted at information sharing between banks. However, many deceptions take place in the non-banking sector. Now, if the mechanism is extended beyond the banking sector, then I hope that the regulation would not be too stringent so as to strangle the developments of the markets. Now, the administration adopted an open attitude to our other suggestion, and the administration pointed out that there is the AML-CTF ordinance right now. Now, many deception involve cross-boundary scamming. Now, we need cross-boundary collaboration to crack down on these scamming activities. Now, Hong Kong banks in Hong Kong are very prudent concerning suspicious transaction, especially transaction of remittance of money across the border. Now, if it is suspected that the client is a victim of scam, the banks would suspend the transaction. Now, we urge the administration to enhance collaboration with our neighboring jurisdictions to swiftly identify suspicious transactions and trace the movement of the amount involved. We need to enhance our capability in cracking down on cross-border crimes. Now, overall speaking, the bill will help enhance our capability to address scams which have become more rampant globally. It will enhance banks' ability to prevent prohibited conducts. On the other hand, the government needs to reassure the industry that this will not lead to over-regulation. I so submit I support the bill. Mr. Johnny Ng. President, the Banking Amendment Bill 2025 seeks to promote information sharing between banks and AIs under certain scenarios to enhance our detection ability against financial crimes. Now, digital scamming is a concern. Better information sharing arrangements between AIs is important. I support the bill. Now, with internet and mobile apps playing a more important role in our daily life, there have been more scamming. Now, according to the statistics, over the past 10 years, number of deceptions increased exponentially by 402%. Last year, there were 44,486 scams involving with some $9.1 billion involved. Now, most scamming activities involve cross-border crime, and it is really difficult to enforce the law. Now, the detection rate as at 2024, it was just 10.6%. It was a new low in the past 10 years and also lower than the average detection rate of 30.4%. Now, according to a global survey, the amount of money lost from scamming globally amounted to some 8 trillion Hong Kong dollars. 2/3 of them took place in Asia. The average money loss for each victim was some $12,300. Now, I think the mechanism proposed under the bill will be helpful to crack down on financial crime and also enhance the detection and prevention capability of banks and law enforcement agencies. It will help us better cope with the rising trend of global scamming. We can prevent the banking sector from being manipulated by criminals and protect properties. Now, the mechanism is aligned with international standards and can enhance our position as an international financial center. Now, there is a voluntary mechanism under the bill so that AIs having identified money laundering activities or suspected prohibited conducts like proliferation of weapons of mass destruction can make use of the relevant platforms to share the information about their accounts. The scope has been extended from corporate accounts to individual accounts. The proposed mechanism will enable swift actions to hold transaction and collect evidence. This will better protect the public from scammers. Now, there are views that the voluntary participation model may provide a loophole. A timetable should be set for mandatory participation. Now, I think depending on the implementation of the mechanism, the government can consider imposing a mandatory requirement. Now, there are two platforms, that is Finest and ICL.net, for voluntary sharing of information. Now, they are very secure platform, and also this allows sharing of personal accounts information, including those created by foreigners. Now, when banks identify possible scams, usually they would deny the request for the transaction to prevent outward movement of money. But I think the banks can do better in terms of client protection. Cross-boundary scams have become more rampant. Now, we are still in need of more tools. Now, the government should study enhancing the functions of the platforms so as to better address the more rampant and more diverse international scamming. Regular information sharing should take place between Hong Kong and other international bodies. In the long run, financial organizations must continue to enhance their monitoring system so as to rapidly freeze and hold suspicious transactions. Besides enhancing awareness in society, the government should study establishing a mechanism to deal with scammers. For example, in the mainland, there is a accountability system requiring organizations to share the burden. Now, this will add to the cost of the operation of the industry, so we have to be careful. Overregulation would deter legit transactions. Now, all in all, the bill is an important step for enhancing our capability in tackling scam. Now, I hope the mechanism would enhance our position as an international financial center and better protect properties. Thank you.
Mr. Tan Yue-hang, I speak in support of the Banking Amendment Bill 2025. This year, we see that there are over 444,000 more cases in 2025, an increase by 20%. The total amount of loss amount to about 9.1%. These syndicates have made use of a network of accounts to launder money. It's very difficult to enforce the law. All these reasons results in difficulty in claiming back the amount. These syndicates make use of mule accounts to launder money and to transfer illegally obtained funds. There are people engaged to open accounts for these illegal purpose. Currently, we have Finance, which enables sharing of information of corporate accounts related to illegal activities. The bill introduces a new mechanism to extend the scope of the platform from corporate accounts to individual accounts. For the purpose of prevent and detect crimes, banks are allowed to exchange information. AIs can make use of the system to exchange information, and they are protected by safe harbors. Disclosure of information for detection of crime is exempt under the PDPO and their obligation of confidentiality. The bill enables banks and AIs to exchange information to assist the police to zoom in on suspicious accounts and detect network of mule accounts. It's very difficult to trace funds. The funds are transferred to different accounts within minutes. Time is of essence. The proposal shortens the time required to share information. Banks can block the transaction and stop the funds. That's why I support the bill. This will enhance the ability to detect crimes and mute accounts. We need to work together. We also need to establish a mechanism for tracing, reclaiming, and returning of funds. There are some measures in place. This bill enables exchange of information. In addition, there are other anti-fraud measures in place. I think they all help to stop the movement of fraudulent funds. This will enhance the efficiency of crime detection. It will better protect the public. There is room for improvement to combat money laundering activities. We need to enhance the mechanism to freeze cross-boundary funds. We can sign memorandum of understandings with other jurisdictions to put in place mechanisms to freeze funds. Banks can also improve the mechanism to stop funds and the return of funds. The Hong Kong MA can improve the regulatory regime. With a multi-pronged approach, fraud and money laundering activities can be tackled. The police, banks have also need to enhance publicity to the general public, especially the alertness of making transfers. They can be in the form of video clips or mandatory alert messages. I so submit. I speak in support of the bill. Ms. Kamin Khan. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I declare that I serve in an AI under Cap 155. I'll call these authorized institutions as banks. I speak in support of the Banking Amendment Bill 2025. In recent years, we see an increase in financial crime, especially digital fraud and related money laundering activities. In 2024, the police received nearly 45,000 fraud cases with a loss of over $9.1 billion. About 90% of them are related to fraud, mule accounts, and money laundering. These are individual accounts. Currently, finance is limited to the sharing of information of corporate accounts. Under contract law and common law jurisdictions, banks have the obligation of confidentiality. Under PDPO, that is Cap 486, banks are unable to share information with each other in relation to suspicious transactions. Perpetrators make use of this loophole to quickly move accounts or hide them. Law enforcement agencies have lost the time to stop these activities. Within 10 minutes or even shorter, funds can be moved away. To tackle this challenge, the bill proposes to amend the banking ordinance by introducing a voluntary mechanism to enable banks to share information when they detect or suspect prohibited conduct, that is, money laundering, terrorist financing, or financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, share information of individual accounts. They are afforded safe harbors. I collectively call this the new mechanism. However, safe harbors have limitations. The Hong Kong MA said that the sharing of information is limited to detection of crime. If there is any abuse, the safe harbors will be lost. I have followed the scrutiny of the bill. I will speak on 5 areas. First, designated platform and its security. The administration said that they plan to continue to use finance that is already in operation. There is actually another platform. One is operated by the Hong Kong Interbank Clearing Limited, ICLNet. They will first consider system security. In the Bills Committee, I expressed concern about the system of control of these platforms. I asked the administration to disclose the list of participating banks so that the customers can make a good and informed choice. The administration said that there is a dual authentication limited to authorized personnel of the Hong Kong MA, the police, and the other regulator under finance. Banks are required to assess their own internal control. In the committee, we're told about the names of the 10 banks. They cover about 70% of corporate and individual accounts. However, we suggested in the Bills Committee that the Hong Kong AB as well as the Hong Kong MA will encourage more banks to participate. I hope that a full list of participating banks will be made available on the website. In terms of privacy protection, I have expressed my concern in the Bills Committee. The administration said that they have consulted the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, and they've had in-depth discussion with them as well. I declare that I'm a member of a committee in the Office of the Privacy Commissioner. Under 58(2) of the PDPO, for the detection of crimes, there is an exempt from the PDPO. When the bill is passed, this will directly be an exempt. There is no need to apply for an exempt from the Privacy Commissioner. The Hong Kong MA also indicated that a guideline will be promulgated in relation to operational standards relating to time limits for information keeping. There is also a requirement on banks to put in place systems of control. Currently, if banks become aware or suspect any suspicious financial activities, they have to, in accordance with the law, submit a report to the JFIU. This is called a suspicious transaction report. I'm concerned about the complementarity of the reporting system as well as the mechanism. Under the bill, before a bank submits the report, they can first make use of finance to inform other participating banks so that when these banks receive the alert, they will be able to block or stop the suspicious transaction. The new mechanism fills the information gap of Cap 485 in relation to Organized and Serious Crimes Ordinance. This enables banks to have better quality of information sharing. This will enhance the effectiveness of stopping transfer of illicit funds. When it comes to cross-boundary fraudulent activities, if there are funds coming into Hong Kong, can the bank make use of this new mechanism to block the illicit funds? It's a question we have asked in the Bills Committee. The administration confirmed that the money laundering definition in the bill is wider than Cap 615, that is Anti-Money Laundering and Counter-Terrorist Financing Ordinance. In addition to the definition in Cap 615, it also includes proceeds from indictable offences. So if there is a crime overseas, and if banks are involved in dealing with the proceeds, they are able to share the information. Together with 9 regions and countries, the police have set up a platform, Frontier Plus. For the first time, there was a joint operation. We've heard about the results. One of the cases was a deepfake case used in Singapore. With the assistance of the Hong Kong police, the entirety of the funds have been stopped and recovered. I believe that with the endorsement of the bill, with the cooperation with law enforcement agencies, there will be more effective law enforcement across the border. Enhancing sharing of information about banks is only one part of the whole picture. There is also room for dedicated legislation to combat the use of meal accounts. I said in the Bills Committee that the mainland and Singapore, in terms of selling and lending of banks, there are dedicated legislations with a lower threshold compared to CAP 455. That threshold is lower according to the mainland laws if objectively there is a selling or lending of accounts for a return of to receive no less than $3,000, then it is evidence. Under the Singaporean laws, as long as it can be proved that the income level is not proportionate towards the receipt of funds, and if there are suspicions as to the source of the funds, then it is indictable. I asked the administration to look into it to improve our framework. The administration said that they would look into it with the police. There was a plan to make other amendments relating to the banking ordinance. However, because of order of priority, they have moved this bill first to combat rampant fraudulent cases. It's a right decision. I speak in support of the bill.
Mr. Rock Chen. President, I speak in support of the Banking Amendment Bill 2025. It is to introduce a voluntary mechanism to allow AIs, authorized institutions, to disclose information. Also, the bill will allow for the disclosure of information as well as the use of information, and a safe harbor will be provided for the institutions disclosing information. This is for the sharing of information, and this will help detect and prevent financial crimes and help boost efficiency for that. Since COVID, online banks as well as e-payment systems have been developing rapidly. Money laundering activities have been very rampant. According to police statistics, in year 2024, there were about 45,000 fraud cases, and about $9.1 billion were lost in year 2023. The police force, the HKMA as well as the HKAB, rolled out Finest. It allows institutions to, on a voluntarily basis, rapidly exchange information. However, this system only covers corporate accounts, not individual accounts. Over 90% of the money laundering activities involve personal accounts, but finance cannot cover these cases. This will lead to an information gap among banks. If an institution detects unlawful activities because of confidentiality obligations, information could not be shared with other banks. Therefore, there is a need to amend this ordinance. The bill seeks to provide a safe harbor for banks so that banks can, on a voluntary basis, share information about personal accounts. If banks are of the view that the information can help detect or prevent prohibited conduct such as money laundering activities or terrorist financing, then they can, through this mechanism, share information about the bank accounts concerned without being held accountable or be exempted from civil actions. However, banks will have to comply with confidentiality requirements. I'd like to make the following 3 points. First, the need to introduce this voluntary mechanism. This mechanism can allow AIs to flexibly cope with suspicious activities and share information in a timely manner so that they can rapidly take actions to prevent any potential financial crimes. This will help reduce risks faced by other institutions. This can also help enhance the overall stability of the financial system. Through sharing of information, there will be closer cooperation between institutions, and then they can help form a stronger anti-fraud network. Also, this will have to be in line with international standards. The laws in the US, the UK, and Singapore are similar. They all provide for the safe harbor mechanism as well as the voluntary mechanism. Secondly, on the safe harbor provisions, provisions concerning the safe harbor in the bill, they provide a legal protection for AIs within reasonable scope. If banks disclose information, they could be exempted from legal responsibilities, and this is crucial for information sharing. There were banks who were concerned about their legal consequences and were therefore unwilling to share information. Now, with the safe harbor, I believe that banks could have their concerns eased. Now, with reasonable suspicion, banks can share this information, and this helps strengthen the anti-fraud measures. I also agree with the Bills Committee that the voluntary mechanism should provide enough incentives for AIs to participate in the mechanism, especially for SMEs that face high costs as well as technical challenges. For example, the government can streamline or simplify the compliance checks or provide tax incentives and technical support. Also, law enforcement should be stepped up. There are provisions in the bill that enable the entire sharing of information be monitored and conducted in a transparent and efficient manner. The government, when drafting the bill, it considered the existing legal framework as well as the needs of the banking sector to ensure that personal information will not be invaded, and this is also to ensure the integrity of information. All in all, this helps enhance the sharing and cooperation among institutions, and this also helps provide legal framework and protection for institutions. This can help intercept illicit funds and the collection of intelligence to effectively protect the public from frauds and deceptions. I so submit. I speak in support of the bill. Mr. Chan Kin-po. Thank you, Deputy President. I speak in support of the Banking Amendment Bill 2025. In year 2024, there was a significant increase of the number of frauds to 45,000. This is double of that compared to 2011, and over $9.1 billion were lost. From media reports, we know that many elderly people got deceived and a lot of mainland students as well. And we're facing unprecedented challenges posed by financial crimes. Currently, the sharing mechanism only covers corporate accounts, but 90% of the illicit activities are done through personal accounts. And therefore, criminals could exploit the loopholes and transit the illicit funds. This bill helps plug the loophole as it proposes the information sharing mechanism. Banks, when detect any money laundering activities or terrorist financing activities, they could on a voluntarily basis share information with other banks, such as information about bank accounts or information about the counterparts. Through the sharing system formed by the HKMA as well as the police force and the HKAB, illicit funds could be intercepted rapidly, and the police could also ensure the reports made by banks in relation to transactions. This helps combat cross-boundary crimes. There are two procedures concerning the sharing of information. This is to strike a balance between risk management as well as the protection of personal data. Through activating the procedures, banks could communicate with each other. In relation to high-risk transactions, multiple banks can trigger the reporting mechanism, and this can help illicit funds from being moved to other places. This mechanism can help strengthen the anti-fraud measures, and this helps strengthen banks' customers' confidence. Small and medium-sized banks, there are about 10 of them joining the system, and it covers about 75% of the personal as well as corporate accounts. In the UK as well as Singapore and the US, there are similar sharing information mechanisms. And we have the FATF, Financial Action Task Force. The bill can help combat the rampant financial crimes, and this also help fill the information gap. This can help reduce the loss involved in suspicious transactions. This also help enhance our status as an international financial center. However, I'd like to remind the government that there is a need for the HKMA to encourage more banks to participate in the information sharing mechanism. Banks that don't participate, they have to explain why. Like Mr. Ronick Chen said, criminals may open accounts in banks that do not take part in the mechanism. These banks should not become the accomplices of criminals, so there should be 100% participation rate. I so submit I speak in support of the bill.
Mr. Bill Tang, Deputy President, I speak on behalf of the FTU in support of the Banking Amendment Bill 2025. In recent years, the number of global fraud cases has risen significantly. According to the police department, suspected fraud cases rose from some 20,000 in 2020 to 45,000 in 2024, a 100% increase. Some multinational crime syndicates made use of advanced technologies like deepfake and AI to scam victims. They expanded their scamming activities to all over the world. The modus operandi is taxed, and many victims have fallen to this crime. Now, the detection rate is just 10% in Hong Kong. It is a 10-year low. It is also lower than the overall detection rate for other crime, which is 30.4%. Now, under the existing mechanism, it is very difficult to track and recover the illicit money. We lack the tools to deal with the highly advanced crime. So we need to strengthen our regulatory mechanism at source to strengthen protection for property. Now, the HKMA has launched the finance platform in 2023. This was mentioned by many of my colleagues. The success rates of tackling these crimes have been increased, but they only cover corporate accounts. In fact, the majority of new accounts used in scams are individual accounts, and even overseas individual accounts. Crime syndicates can make use of the information gap to swiftly move and hide the illicit fund. So the bill will fill the critical gap in information and also introduce a safe harbor so that on a voluntary basis, banks can share suspicious account information. Now, previously, the scam money would be separated and transferred into tens or even hundreds of overseas accounts. The money would be moved quickly outside Hong Kong. Now, because of the confidentiality obligation as well as personal privacy regulation, banks cannot share information between themselves, and it is very difficult to track the movements of the money. Now, with the amendment, upon detection of crime, banks can swiftly freeze the transaction. This will effectively tackle the situation where crime syndicates use multiple individual accounts to move the money. This will help break down the illicit fund chain and help the law enforcement agencies to crack down on these behaviors and stop the cross-boundary remittance. It will greatly shorten the time required to intercept the fund, and it will enhance the success rate rapidly. Now, concerning lending or selling of personal accounts, it will also enhance deterrence and make the law tighter. People who create accounts for sale will have to face legal consequence. Now, the public is highly concerned that under the mechanism, will there be risks caused to personal data. Now, the bill stipulates that disclosure or usage of information is only allowed for detection of crime or prevention of crime. Now, if AIs break the rules, they will lose the safe harbor status. And also, the financial regulators will be responsible for approving these disclosure. This has struck a balance between prevention and detection of crime and protection of personal data. Now, scammers are very innovative. We need to enhance publicity and education, and we need to have a sound legal framework to ensure that the culprits are caught and also to avoid loss. So the FTU fully supports the bill. Dr. So Chang-Wing. Thank you, Deputy President. I speak in support of the Banking Amendment, Bill 2025. The purpose of the bill is to amend the banking ordinance to extend the scope of information on suspicious transaction through the platform so as to enhance our effectiveness in detecting financial crimes. Last year, there was a rising trend of scamming activities. Just in 2024, the police has received complaints of some 45,000 fraud cases, an increase of 11.7% compared with a year ago. Compared with 2021, the increase was 1.3-fold. The amount involved in this scam is staggering. Last year, 9.15 billion Hong Kong dollars has been scammed. Now, the criminals are always one step ahead of the law enforcement agencies. They have now graduated to using deepfakes, voice imitation, and also cross-boundary scams. Victims include university students. Now, deception leads to significant loss in money as well as hurting our status as an international financial center. Besides undermining public security, it poses security risk to our society. That's why the government must take proactive measure to arrest the trend. The main objective of the bill is to extend the scope of information to be shared on the platforms. The police, HKMA, and the banking sector has established a platform to share information on suspicious accounts and transactions 2 years ago. However, because of privacy concern, the scope only covered corporate accounts. Still, statistics show that 90% of money laundering and prohibited conducts involve individual mule accounts. The bill proposed including personal or individual accounts in the sharing scope. Now, AIs would participate in the mechanism on a voluntary basis. As long as they comply with the rules, they can enjoy safe harbor protection. The new mechanism will allow banks and law enforcement agencies to identify suspicious accounts as soon as possible. it has struck a balance between privacy concern and detection of suspicious accounts and fund movement. This will better protect the public. But there are still aspects that require enhancement. First of all, the voluntary participation basis. There are now 10 banks under the scheme. It covers some 70% of accounts in Hong Kong, but still there is a significant gap of 20% of accounts. Criminals can select bank accounts outside the scope of regulation to dodge the law. Now, the banking sector must be encouraged to participate in the scheme more actively to plug the loophole. Now, most deception cases involve cross-border fund movement. So, establishment of information sharing protocols and also a network to track the movements of illicit funds with our neighbors are very important. Finally, the government must step up publicity and education to explain the new mechanism to the public. And also, educate account holders to protect their accounts from being used as mules. This will address the problem from the roots. This bill is an important step to tackling scam cases. We must continue with this direction. Now, in Singapore, it is an offense to allow others to control your accounts without reasonable excuse. It is a criminal offense in Singapore. Now, this can effectively prevent the proliferation of mule accounts. Second, we need to harness the power of AI to crack down on scams. Now, scammers are becoming more tech-savvy. Recently, some hackers successfully withdrew a large amount of money through very genuine-looking bank links. There will be more similar cases in the future. The government must plan ahead and establish a defense mechanism with AI. For example, using AI to detect deepfake images, biometrics, authentication, and also a swift interception mechanism using AI. Thank you.
Mr. Lam San Ko. Madam Deputy, Hong Kong is an international financial center. We have to make money. We have to guard our wealth as well. One of the three major rating agencies have cast a vote of confidence on Hong Kong. An investment banker now once said that Hong Kong is dead, now says Hong Kong has a bright future. That is the result of concerted efforts, but that's not enough. The government has been promoting family offices with a theme of protecting your wealth. But once you're deceived, if your money can't be recovered, then how can you send out an assurance to others that they should move their wealth to Hong Kong? Banks is the first line of defense. Your wages are deposited into a bank account. The government has put in place a vigorous regulatory regime for banks. I think it runs along the same vein as the regulation of other professions. We have to manage risks. We have to maintain an orderly development of the profession or the sector. We have to protect investors but at the same time avoid over-regulation, which stifles the vitality of the sector. There is a lot of room for improvement when it comes to combating illegal activities. Since 2019, more and more people make use of electronic payment service as well as online banking service to engage in fraudulent cases. They use this means to move as well as hide illicit funds. A lot of people have quoted crime figures from the police. I can tell you that that is a far cry from the actual number of cases that have occurred. Victims are vulnerable people, students or elderly people. Some victims have chosen to commit suicide because they've lost their lifelong savings. That's tragic. We lawyers have encountered a lot of these cases, but there is nothing we can do. Our clients ask us to report to the police, but lawyers may say if it's been already a few days, don't waste your time. You won't be able to get back your money. I've been serving in the council for 3.5 years. I've been following up on cases of fraud when the amount cannot be recovered. I've said that perpetrators make use of a mule account. After a few rounds, the funds have disappeared. There are advocates saying that mule accounts should be cracked down. I'm glad to learn that there are measures to crack down mule account. From October 2023 to May this year, there are 103 people that have been convicted by the court for lending their accounts and involvement in money laundering. There has been enhanced penalty as well. However, the measures to crack down on tracing money deceived is lackluster. In 2023, Finest was launched, but the platform applies only to corporate accounts, but not individual accounts that have often been used by perpetrators. When a suspicious activity is detected, you will have to follow the procedure. Perpetrators don't need to abide by any procedures or rules. There is an information gap. Perpetrators quickly move away the funds. In April 2023, I wrote a letter to the administration to ask them and the Hong Kong MA for figures. Which banks are more involved in deception cases? The administration gave me pages of reply with empty words. I wonder whether it was written by AI. That means there is no statistics that I can understand if it is the government, because the government's been talking about protection of privacy. Under this bill, there is a new information sharing mechanism put in place. To a certain extent, the number of accounts covered has increased. It will enhance the identification and blocking of suspicious activities and funds. This will also enhance cooperation among AIs in their efforts to combat deception and money laundering. However, this mechanism runs on a voluntary basis. For some AIs, for considerations of cost, privacy, operations, they may decide not to participate. That will be a gap. Terrorists or perpetrators may make use of these non-participating banks to use their account to hide the funds. The law is there to protect public interest, but not the interest of lawbreakers. Under Section 58 of PDPO, for the detection or prevention of crimes and the involvement of illicit activities, fraudulent activities, if there is information sharing in relation to these areas, there is an exempt. I asked the government to make this information sharing mechanism into a mandatory one. There should be a centralized monitoring system. We can make use of technologies such as big data for centralized analysis. We can work with overseas law enforcement agencies and regulators to compile a database. This will truly enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of monitoring and supervision. This will be more effective in protecting the wealth of the public. The regulatory regime of banks should be reviewed, especially that relating to opening of accounts. There are more and more deception cases and mule accounts. That means the regulations relating to account opening is ineffective. And this supposedly regulation stifles the development of Hong Kong. The government talks about attracting talents and capitals into Hong Kong. But when funds are moved into Hong Kong, then they are subject to vigorous questioning. A lot of people told me that they have to furnish a large amount of information when opening an account, and the requirements are rather harsh. If the funds come from different countries, the banks will ask for further information or even accreditation from a third party. The collection and vetting of documents is time-consuming. High-valued individuals are very disappointed in Hong Kong and have decided to move their capital somewhere else. If you're in an innovation and technology industry, then you may find it difficult to open an account because there may not be complete transaction or operating records. They may not have a permanent address because they use a shared office or just operating from a coffee shop. The banks see these as signs of high risk. In some cases, banks turn these clients away. This affects Hong Kong's position as an international financial sector. It also stifles development of INTs and startups. We need to have a more flexible approach. We need to take into account risk management and control. We need to facilitate legitimate businesses. I asked the administration to master the art of balance, make sure that there is a proper development and operation in the sector. We need to keep our competitiveness. I speak in support of the Banking Amendment Bill 2025.
Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I now call upon the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury to reply. Then the debate will come to a close. Secretary. Deputy President, on the 2nd of April this year, the government introduced the Banking Amendment Bill 2025 into LegCo. The Bills Committee held 2 meetings to scrutinize these clauses in detail and put forward many valuable views and suggestions. Here, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the chairman of the Bills Committee, Mr. Ronald Chan, the other 4 members who took part in the committee, as well as the other members who've just spoken, for their support for the bill. The bill seeks to amend the banking ordinance to facilitate the sharing of information among AI's authorized institutions, which are mainly banks, under specified circumstances. This is to enhance the efficiency of crime detection and prevention in Hong Kong. As mentioned, in recent years, there's been a significant increase in fraud and related money laundering activities. This is a global trend. In view of this, the Hong Kong Police Force, the HKMA, and the Hong Kong Association of Banks launched Finest, the Financial Intelligence Evaluation Sharing Tool, in June 2023 to enable banks to share with each other suspicious customer and transaction information relating to corporate accounts without compromising confidentiality obligations and statutory requirements on the protection of personal data privacy. According to data available to the police, about 90% of the accounts used for fraud-related money laundering activities are held by individuals. Therefore, we consider there is a need to expand the sharing of information among banks to personal accounts to significantly enhance the role of finance in detecting and preventing crime. In this connection, we propose to amend the banking ordinance through the bill to provide a safe harbor for banks so that when they detect suspected prohibited conduct, such as money laundering, terrorist financing, or financing of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, they could share on a voluntary basis information relating to corporate and personal accounts with other banks. We note that during the scrutiny of the bill, the committee put forward a lot of pragmatic views on the proposed information sharing mechanism. The views cover the following areas. We have given a comprehensive response in the course of the scrutiny. First, the proposed information sharing mechanism will provide protection for the disclosed information, particularly in respect of the monitoring of the use of information and the protection of personal data. Under the proposed mechanism, a bank may only share information with other participating banks through a secure platform that's designated by the HKMA to facilitate inquiries by the receiving bank if it suspects that the transaction or other activities involve prohibited conduct and that the bank has acted with a reasonable degree of care and in good faith. Participating banks are required to comply with the confidentiality requirements and have adequate control systems in place to ensure the security of the information. The information disclosed must be used for the purpose of detecting or preventing prohibited acts, otherwise the banks concerned will lose the protection of the legal immunity under the safe harbor. In this connection, the HKMA will, in accordance with the powers conferred on it under the bill, draw up guidelines on the circumstances in which banks may disclose information under the mechanism, the thresholds and procedures for requesting and disclosing information, confidentiality requirements, controls over internal access to information to assist banks in complying with the requirements. Secondly, it's about the effectiveness of the voluntary sharing mechanism. At present, the finance mechanism, which covers corporate account information, is implemented on a voluntary basis with the participation of 10 retail banks, including large, medium, and small-sized banks. These banks will participate in the information sharing mechanism to be implemented in the future, and the coverage rate of their corporate and personal accounts has reached 75%. The HKMA will continue to analyze the data to review the risk profile of individual banks, and we will continue to encourage more banks to take part in the sharing mechanism. As mentioned, other than banks, what should we do with the other sectors? This bill focuses on banks. This is because over 80% of the suspicious transaction reports come from banks. As to whether this mechanism will be extended to other sectors, we will continue to monitor the situation. Thirdly, it's about the compatibility of the sharing mechanism with the existing notification system. We wish to emphasize that the proposed mechanism will complement the existing reporting mechanism under the Organized and Serious Crimes Ordinance. When suspicious transactions are detected, banks will be able to exchange information prior to filing the reports so that more comprehensive information can be obtained at an earlier stage. The proposed mechanism will enable banks and relevant law enforcement agencies to intercept illicit funds at an early stage, enhance the quality of the reports filed by banks, and speed up the collection of intelligence to better protect the public from fraud and money laundering activities. When we drafted the bill, we communicated with the police, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data, and the banking industry. The proposed mechanism balances the need for personal data privacy protection while protecting bank customers from fraud and the banking system from being exploited by criminals. It's generally supported by the sector. In addition, the proposed mechanism is in line with the data sharing mechanism of the international organizations, and it is broadly comparable to the data sharing mechanisms that have been introduced in advanced economies. The HKMA is working closely with the police and the banking sector to take forward the relevant preparatory work. Our goal is to implement the information mechanism proposed in the bill within this year, and the specific details will be announced separately. President, the proposed information sharing system will enhance Hong Kong's ability to combat fraud and money laundering activities and provide better protection to the public, while at the same time enhance our status as an international financial center. ask members to support and pass the bill. I so submit. I now put the question to you that the Banking Amendment Bill 2025 be read the second time. Will those in favour please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Banking Amendment Bill 2025. This Council now becomes Committee of the Whole Council to consider the Banking Amendment Bill 2025.